when you have those sort of dialogues with teachers, quite commonly you will come across a reticence of teachers to actually talk about it. But that doesn't mean that there aren't fantastic teachers out there who will jump at the opportunity to tell you about what they're doing in their class, who will jump at the opportunity to invite you into their class to see what they're doing, and will want their students to actually tell you what they're doing. So we've got a real mixed bag, I think, in the world of teachers in different stages along this evolutionary path. So, you know, what I really want to have a look at is what are the conditions in what we might call healthy schools. Healthy schools meaning those with really open attitudes to student learning and teacher learning. Those schools that could quite honestly call themselves learning communities, meaning that everybody in that community regards themselves as a learner. That is healthy, actually, because if teachers don't regard themselves and don't regard teaching itself as a learning act, then it's going to be more of a struggle to move along that path. Okay? So I want to have a look at those conditions in those sorts of schools. And finally, what I want to do is to offer you a model for enhancing pedagogy. And along the way, in the 15 minutes, she's moved, our timekeeper. In the 15 minutes we've got left, we'll talk about some tactics along the way. Now I'm distinguishing, just for clarity here, I'm distinguishing between tactics and strategy by meaning that a strategy is a more structured, ordered, connected approach, whereas tactics are often quite small, short-term actions that you might take. I think it was Bala who said that teaching is much more complicated than it used to be. I had a conversation with a principal not all that long ago. Actually, he was my principal. Not for very long, but he was my principal. And he was describing his role in staffing. It was a very nice description. He said, my role in staffing is to choose teachers that I think are going to do a good job. Because once I've chosen them, once I've appointed them, I put them in a room, I close the door and I leave them to their own devices. And if I don't hear any complaints from parents, I know I got it right. But teaching's not like that anymore. We all know that. And therefore, it's in our interest to really look at how can we improve the quality of the teaching that goes on, no longer behind closed doors, I hope. Looking at adopting international programs such as the IB, you'll realise how different they are in their concept of teaching and learning. Much more complex. And so, you know, it is a great challenge for teachers. But fortunately, we know a lot more. We know a heck of a lot more about how students learn. And therefore, principals expect a lot more, or should, of their teachers. And the reason the principals expect a lot more is because now our students, by and large, are far more vocal than they used to be. Our parents, by and large, are far better educated and much more likely to come up to the school and complain if they're not happy. So there's much more pressure on principals to do something. So that pressure is then transferred onto the teachers to do something. It has been about 40 years or thereabouts since the beginning of real educational research. And in that 40 years, a bit over 40 years, boy oh boy, haven't there been lots of theories about learning. And some of these theories have actually made it into practice, for good or for bad. You know, sometimes it's been successful, sometimes it hasn't been successful. But nonetheless, there's lots out there. I'm trying to paint a picture here of the complexity of the situation that you all live in and that we all know very well. And yet, despite all this that we know about how students learn, and despite all the sort of complexity that we all acknowledge out there, the didactic approach, which in fact is what I'm employing now, I'm sorry to say, but the didactic approach is alive and very, very well and is living amongst us. Now, I'm not suggesting that we get rid of it completely, because I think there is a role for it, but unfortunately it is too commonly used in all the observations that I have made over the years, far too commonly used. Well, it's not all that surprising when you think about it, because the models that most teachers have of teaching really was their own teacher when they were at school. And so by and large, what you get is the reproduction of that model into their own teaching. Slightly modified, of course, but nonetheless, that's the model. You know, it sounds a little bleak, really, doesn't it? But I think it's a reasonably accurate view, at least from my perspective it is.